First thing I want to get talking about here is this case that happened in Illinois with this 6-year-old kid. So, I don't know if you guys remember, if for those of you who were with us way back in 2001 when the Twin Towers were destroyed, kind of what we saw then with just a sort of general bigotry towards everything Middle Eastern. It's kind of like we just went right back to that now. Like this current war with Hamas in the Gaza Strip and the terrorist attack, which spurned the Israeli counterattack that seems to be comprised solely of war crimes. Like what we're seeing now. The shit basically hitting the fan like crazy over there. The attitudes that we're seeing here in the States seems to be very, very similar to me as to what we saw right after 9/11. And it was just a sort of general hatred towards Muslims, and just not just Muslims, but everything Middle Eastern. If you remember back, it was not just Muslim people. It was basically anybody from that part of the world. You know, and if you remember right, it was, I mean, what did we do? Right, as a country, we attacked Iraq, even though the 9/11 hijackers were all from Saudi Arabia. So it's sort of like Americans, you know, once you get that racism going, they don't really give a shit about who the actual victims of that racism is, right? And that's kind of what we're seeing here. You know, we're seeing people who have absolutely nothing to do with this conflict at all getting basically blamed for it and getting persecuted over it. So here's an example. In Illinois, we had a 6-year-old boy who comes from a Palestinian family living in the United States who was brutally stabbed to death by a 71-year-old man. What the hell happened? Well, here's the story. You guys will love this one. Kid's name is Wadea Al-Fayoume. I think I'm pronouncing that right, although I probably am not. 6-year-old boy. He was living with his mother and father in Illinois. They apparently have been in the United States for quite some time. So this young kid was an American citizen born in this country, as far as I can tell. And their 71-year-old landlord, whose name was Joseph Zuba, is the one that perpetrated the crime here. Now, here's what kind of really blows me away about this particular case, is that apparently they were friends prior to this attack, prior to this 71-year-old man flipping out and stabbing this young kid to death. Apparently, he was rather fond of this family and would often visit and would buy toys for the kid, give him gifts, things like that. He also apparently built them a treehouse for this kid. So the kid knew who he was and liked him, and he liked them. And they were like friends. And that's what makes it all the more insane that this guy would just flip out and kill this kid. So what happened exactly? He shows up, he attacks the child's mother. Child's mother gets stabbed roughly 12 times. She runs into the bathroom momentarily, comes out. I think she calls the police. She comes out and finds the old man stabbing her son to death. Which you may think, like, oh, well, how come she didn't go to try to defend her son, whatever. Well, people do strange things when it comes to life and death situations. We can't criticize anything that this woman may have done or how she may have acted because we weren't in her shoes. We don't know what was going through her mind. I mean, really, can any of you out there say that if you just been stabbed 12 times, I mean, what would you do? By a close family friend? I mean, would you have reacted any different? Who knows, right? So, yeah, she survives. The 6-year-old boy, unfortunately, did not. He was stabbed, I believe, 22 times. Keep in mind, you know, this is a 71-year-old man, so even though the kid was 6, he couldn't fight him off, anything like that. And also keep in mind that if this man had a gun, who knows how many other people could have died. I'm sure the woman, you know, the mother for sure would have died if the guy had a gun. Didn't, had a knife. She actually survived. Apparently, you know, you can get stabbed 12 times and live, I guess. So that's pretty fucked up. The father of this young kid was completely taken by surprise by this and was apparently in denial that it happened. He even suggested to the police that maybe it was an accident, that maybe the kid ran up and gave this old man a hug and got stabbed by accident. That's how close they were as family friends, apparently. Unfortunately, no, I don't think that you can stab somebody 22 times by accident like that. So yeah, Joseph Zuba here is going to prison. What caused him to go crazy? Well, apparently he is a rabid consumer of conservative news. What a surprise. I'm sure you all didn't see that coming. And here's the thing about this, right? Because right now we're seeing a basically demonization of everything, like I said, everything Middle Eastern, not just the Palestinians, but everything that has to do with anybody from the Middle East gets blamed. Whenever something like this happens, whenever there's a terrorist attack, whenever there's a war, and it doesn't matter where the terrorist attack is. You know, this time it was pretty bad. The terrorist attack from Hamas was pretty freaking bad. I mean, even those of you out there who may be taking, you know, sympathetic to the Palestinians, which I am very, very sympathetic to them. Even we have to admit that they went too far. They went too far. They went out, they went on a rampage. They killed women and children. They kidnapped, took women as hostages, broke their legs. Something like 150 hostages, from what I understand, were taken. They went out and murdered children. No, you can't support anybody who murders children. I'm sorry. And that's the thing. Like I said in my previous video, my sympathies lie with the Palestinians in this conflict, because they are the oppressed people. They've been oppressed for 50 years, and they're the ones that are basically fighting for survival. They don't have any of the power in this situation, and they're basically the victims of a slow-motion genocide. But that's no excuse, man. It's not an excuse. I mean, tell that to the families of their victims. That flies right out of the window. Once you target civilians, that's it. I mean, would we be saying anything different if they just would have gone out and targeted police and military? No, people would still be pissed off, but they would have the moral high ground, right? They'd be able to say, hey, these people were hurting us, we hurt them back, we're fighting for freedom. Kind of the difference when it comes to, like, just using as a comparison, the conflict in Ukraine, the Russian-Ukrainian war right here. The Ukrainians were the ones who were attacked, and they're defending themselves, and that's why we're supporting them. I mean, that, and besides the fact that it's convenient because Russia is our enemy and shit, right? So it's like, but even still, it's like they were clearly the victims in that conflict. Russia is clearly the aggressor. The Russians are doing things like reducing entire Ukrainian cities to rubble, that kind of thing. Have the Ukrainians gone out and targeted Russian civilians? No, not like this. They've had the ability to as well. There's been several times in that conflict where they've struck targets within Russia, including sending drones to the Kremlin to try to blow up the Kremlin. That's happened a couple of times, right? So clearly, if they wanted to, they could attack civilian targets, but they haven't done that. And even though it's like when a civilian target gets attacked on the Russian side, it's a big deal. It happens. And that's the thing, is that these things just happen, right? Because war is not a clean business. War is a very messy business. and your smartest smart bomb is still going to screw up and will fall on the wrong place, things like that. That's kind of what happened with this hospital. We'll talk about that in a minute, right? In fact, we could just talk about that now. Perfect example of that, right? We're kind of going off on a side tangent here, but fuck it, I don't care. This is my video, I'm going to do what I want. Talk a little bit about that hospital. That's a big thing that happened, you know, just a bomb falls on a hospital, kills like 150 people or whatever, right? And both sides are blaming the other side. Basically saying, oh, well, this is Hamas, they're the ones that did this. Which is, first off, why the fuck would Hamas bomb their own fucking people? They wouldn't. So, I could see it being an accident. And it looks like, from other commentators I'm seeing, that the evidence is pointing towards that's exactly what happened. Is that it was a rocket that Hamas fired. And that just messed up, came down and blew up in this parking lot and killed 150 people in this hospital, right? Does not look like Israel was targeting that hospital. But it doesn't matter. They're still ultimately responsible. They're the reason why this conflict happened in the first place, the Israelis. Because at any given time, they could have gave these people rights, and they haven't. And that's, you know, when people get desperate, they get radicalized, and they do horrible things. So in that sense, it's like, yeah, okay. Like I said in my previous video, I'm not supporting the fact that Hamas did this, but I am not surprised that it happened. It's like, well, what do you think's going to happen when there's people living under these conditions? But anyway, getting back to the story at hand, getting back to the story of Wadea Al-Fayoume, if I'm even pronouncing that right, I'm sorry. I don't mean to be mispronouncing it. Does it surprise anybody that this kind of thing happens, right? That when there's a war like this and you see propaganda, racism, and bigotry flying from every TV, every radio, every online source, every YouTube video. Like, does it surprise anybody that there's going to be people out there who are just unhinged and will use this as an excuse to listen to the voices in their heads and go out and murder people? It happens every time. It happened during 9/11. Afterwards at 9/11, the bigotry against Middle Easterners of all creeds was so bad that they were doing things like they shut down the fucking Aladdin Hotel, for Christ's sake. The Aladdin Hotel. It's like, it was a themed hotel, like a Middle Eastern themed hotel. They shut that down because of racism. There was a crazy guy that went to a fucking Sikh temple in 2012 and murdered like 26 people. Because he was too fucking stupid to understand that they weren't Muslim. Because to him, anybody from that part of the world was a terrorist. You know, what the fuck, they were wearing turbans, good enough, close enough. I mean, this guy was like a white supremacist and shit. But you get the idea. Because people, you know, racist people, bigoted people, all they need is the slightest excuse to go on murderous rampages. I mean, ultimately, that's what the right wing in this country really wants, is to just murder people. And now they're seeing it in the news. If they're seeing everywhere they flip in the news and everything they read online, it's telling them that this is World War III and shit. And you have to go out and, like, won't somebody do something about these, you know, terrorists, that kind of thing. And when you have people on, like, Fox News and shit, spreading all these lies saying that Hamas is sneaking over the southern border, crap like that, and that there's sleeper cells in the country. How many of you have heard of that stupid bullshit? That conspiracy theory. The conspiracy theory that Middle Eastern terrorists are working with drug cartels to sneak sleeper cells over the southern border into our country. How many people have you heard that shit? There's zero evidence for that at all. That is complete, made-up, 100% bullshit. Yet I see it every goddamn day. Every time I go on Twitter, every time I go on Reddit, every time I go on Facebook, every time I turn on conservative talk radio of any kind, some fucking asshole brings up some insane conspiracy theory. You know, that one, if not that one, then something even crazier. Right? Because this is what happens when you have, you know, bigotry, when the bigots and the racists and the fucking Christo-fascists go into overdrive. And there's always going to be people that just are already, they already have 1 foot off of the fucking diving board, just ready to plunge in at a moment's notice. It's fucked up, folks. It's fucked up. It's screwed up. And this kid had nothing to do with that. That's the thing about this. That's what makes racism so dangerous. Bigotry is so dangerous, right? This kid had absolutely nothing to do with any of that whatsoever. He's a 6-year-old kid. He wasn't a terrorist. He wasn't related to any of them. He wasn't a refugee. He wasn't anything like that at all. Nothing to do with this at all. But his family was targeted just simply because they came from the same part of the world as where this trouble is happening. That's the true horror of racism. The true horror of racism and bigotry is that no one is safe from it. That's what's really the real scary part about racists and bigots, is that you have no idea who they're going to target. They could find some reason to target you. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what your race is, what your religion is, whatever. If they think you're a sympathizer, you could be targeted. Right? Because that's what happened at 9/11. Anybody who spoke out was targeted. Remember the Dixie Chicks? Lost their contracts. They got canceled. You know, back before canceling was a thing. What was the other guy? Donahue lost his TV show because he spoke out against the war. Stuff like that, you know. Constantly. I remember myself, I almost got my ass beat by a drunken Marine at a party once because I was anti-war. And this guy decided that he was going to give me an earful. And it was like, you know, I mean, shit. I mean, he was drunk as fuck. Could I have taken him? I don't know, maybe. Probably would have beat my ass. It's a fucking Marine. Right? Even if he did have, like, you know, 8 beers in him, probably just make him more dangerous. Yeah. That's, I mean, I've had to spend, you know, years. I spent years being called a traitor, being called an asshole, being called a traitor, saying that I was, you know, they'll kill you just because of blah, 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 and just because you're American, whatever, it doesn't matter. All this shit just because I was anti-war. Because I had the correct stance on those wars, on the Iraq war, on the Afghan war, right? And I maintain, you know, 20 years later, I think that after knowing everything that happened over there in the Middle East because we elected the wrong fucking person who went out and started a fucking war there, I think I'm justified in having that anti-war stance, and I don't care. Right? I don't give a fuck. Because history has borne that shit out. I was right, they were wrong. Fat load of fucking good that does to all the people who have been killed. So that's the thing about that. It's like, you gotta watch out for this shit. Right? And this is just, it sucks. It sucks. There's not much you can do about it except stand up and don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to express yourself. Don't be afraid to express your opinion. Don't be afraid to speak out for what is right. They want you to cower in fear and conform to what they want you to think. That's what it is. They want you to obey, ultimately. And I say this also against Hamas as well. I'm not just saying this against the conservatives in this country or whatever. This is what, I mean, let's not forget, Hamas is fucking, those people are like religious fundamentalist insane people. They want the exact same shit, right? They want to control you too. They want to dictate what you can and can't believe as well, just the same way that the militant Christians in this country do. They're not good guys at all. The real victims in all of this are the people. Palestinian people have nothing to do with this whatsoever. The people that have been forced to basically leave their homes. 2 million people forced to just basically leave their homes in northern Gaza and go south. No food, no water, no medicine, no idea what the fuck's going to happen to them in preparation for an Israeli ground war. Right? Those are the real fucking victims. Those people and the poor little 6-year-old kids in the world who get stabbed by their insane landlords. You know, war affects everybody. And there is no positives when it comes to a war. Even the winners lose in a war. Something we always got to remember.
Hello folks, if you like what I do and you want to support the channel, please consider buying something from my Etsy shop, supporting me on Patreon, liking and subscribing, and checking me out across my social media links listed below. Thank you all so much, and see you next time.